So Pergamum was cool because I didn't realize this. The Acropolis, that is the administrative center of the city, was way high up, and you have to take a cable car. So this is me taking a picture of somebody else passing me by as I'm moving. You can see the Lycus River snaking around, just a beautiful sight up there for this ride. Two main things to see up there. One is the Temple of Trajan. Again, Trajan being treated as though he is divine. This is actually built about 20 years after Revelation is written, and so this wouldn't have been standing at the time. Here's a different angle. Here's his altar. Trajan was also an emperor. In fact, our first correspondence between an emperor and a provincial leader who's killing Christians, where it's the pagans talking about their killing of Christians, comes from Trajan's time. I include that document at a later point in the presentation, I think in like Revelation 17. Oh, more inscriptions talking about how awesome Trajan is. The interesting part here, Tontis ke thalisiron, that he is dominant over land and sea. Well, this type of rhetoric that is used is for the Imperium is going to be challenged in Revelation 10 when the angel puts his foot on the sea and on the land, and it says essentially that Christ is the boss. Danielle looking especially tall. I saw this little archway, and I was like, Danielle, get under there and see if you can stand up straight. It was great. She probably didn't know I was going to share this, but I did. So you go up to the ledge and you look out, and you can see the modern city down there, and you can tell it's a Muslim city, right? Because the city where Satan dwells. You figure that'd be like a way of selling pastries, and there'd be a bar, called Satan's Dwelling or something. They don't own this at all. It's completely foreign to them. You can see off to the left here their theater. Picture of it when there's some grass. Looking back to where I was taking that other picture. Get a better sense of how this worked. So the theater, and then the great altar of Zeus was next to this, and various palaces up top. On the left here, you can see a small altar dedicated to Caesar Augustus. This was found at Pergamum. This is from about 25 BC. The one who has the sharp two-edged sword says, I know where you dwell, where Satan's throne is. You hold fast my name, did not deny my faith, even in the days of Antipas, my faithful witness, who's killed among you where Satan dwells. In a provincial capital where the proconsul wields the right of the sword. So this is where people can be put to death. We know shortly after Revelation is written, a number of Christians are gathered in the area and taken to this city and put to death. The sovereign Christ is armed with a two-edged sword and issues a warning of his own. So this is the city that carries the sword, and so this is the correspondence with Christ's appearance in chapter 1. The sword is for Pergamum. Antipas is called my faithful witness. The only other person called faithful witness is Jesus, and they both died for the gospel. Later tradition stated that Antipas had been roasted to death in a bronze bull during the reign of Domitian for standing up against paganism, and that his name, Antipas, anti means against, and pas means all. That's all very speculative. We don't know that. We don't know how he died, but nevertheless, this is the tradition. Where Satan dwells. Why does Jesus say Satan dwells in Pergamum? Well, there's a number of ideas. Is it the altar of Zeus? When Christians watched pagans pray, they didn't think, well, there's nobody on the other end of the phone, right? They didn't think there's nobody there to receive the prayer. They said, as Paul says in 1 Corinthians 10:20, the things that pagans offer, they offer to demons. And so they believe the gods exist. They just think that they are demons. And if Zeus is kind of the king of the gods, then he may be thought of as the king of the demons. He may be thought of as being Satan. Also, all along the base of this altar, there are pictures of the war when the gods came down and killed the giants. Well, there's a version of this story in Genesis where the angels come down and mate with women and produce giants, and it's God who kills the giants in the flood. And so seeing this version of the story told along this altar of this demonic episode of these fallen angels, Christians might have come to associate this altar especially with demons. Does he say it's the place where Satan dwells? Because Asclepius, the killer god, is there. Sometimes this guy's with his wife, sometimes he's a bachelor, but nevertheless he's always got a snake. Well, Revelation 12:9 is going to use a serpent in reference to the devil. The most popular notion has been because the Roman proconsul was based there, there's a temple for the worship of Augustus there, all these things. I'd say that I think the single biggest reason Pergamum is called the throne of Satan and called the place where Satan lives is because it's the only city to have killed a Christian at this point. Right? In Revelation 13, when the beast starts killing Christians, it's going to say that his throne was given to him by Satan. And so John's logic seems to be that if you want to know where the devil is and where he's especially powerful, just look where Christian blood is being shed. That seems to be the most major thrust of this logic. He says, you have there some who hold to the teaching of Balaam, who kept teaching Balak to put a stumbling block before the sons of Israel and to eat things sacrificed to idols and commit acts of immorality. Now, you know this story from the book of Numbers, where the Midianites are like, how do we get the Israelites in trouble with their God? And they say, well, send the temple prostitutes, and the men will want to sleep with them, and then so you can bring them into the temple and get them involved in idolatry, etc. This seems to be an appropriate Old Testament text to bring in because they had embraced some type of teaching that had justified going to pagan dinners, participating in eating of the food that's sacrificed to idols. And many of these dinners, especially if they're put on by successful business people, would be attended by prostitutes. And so that is probably the reference to Balaam and Balak in eating food sacrificed to idols, and immorality, the word is porneia, fornication. And who knows what this teaching was like? We have no idea. But, Christianity is basically living in this funny psychological space where you're making decisions every day. Can I justify this? Am I going to put this off? Am I going to deal with it today? Am I going to change? And your family, you can't participate in family events if your family is pagan, and there's a household god and they're going to dedicate the meal to him. So it'd be very isolating even from your relatives. And so you can imagine there would be Christians trying to come up with a doctrine, trying to come up with some sort of justification for how we can be Christian and still participate in these things. And apparently there is such a teaching here. We don't have porneia in the modern church in terms of going to the idol's temple, but we do have pornography, a word that is derived from porneia. And I think it's an applicable point because it's easy to read this and think, well, that's not our problem. This is not a modern Christian problem. And it's striking how devastating pornography is in the modern church. Just a few statistics. Pornography use increases marital infidelity rates by more than 300%. 56% of American divorces involve one party having an obsessive interest in pornographic websites. 70% of Christian youth pastors report that they have had at least one teen come to them for help regarding pornography in the past year. 68% of church-going men and more than 50% of pastors view porn on a regular basis. Now, that thing about 50% of pastors, that just seemed way way too much to me. I found a different statistic, 2016, in a Barna report that said 57% of pastors and 64% of youth pastors admit that they have struggled with porn, either currently or in the past, and that 5% of pastors claim they are currently addicted to porn and that they're living in constant fear of discovery. This 50% number, I don't know how they came up with this. I tried to track this down and I couldn't quite find it. I knew it'd be bad, but that seems it seems like the Barna report, I think, might be a little more helpful. 13% of self-identifying Christian women say they've never watched porn. 87% of Christian women have watched porn. 55% of married men and 25% of married women say they watch porn at least once a month. 57% of pastors say porn addiction is the most damaging issue in their congregation. So a very serious issue. And, you know, it's interesting that as is the case in the Balak and Balaam story, it's not religious concepts per se that made them want to go and follow Balaam. It was their lust, right? This becomes this gateway to all these other problems, and similar destructive patterns are borne out by the modern statistics. He says, therefore repent, or else I'm coming to you quickly, and I will make war against them with the sword of my mouth. Now, it's interesting that he doesn't seem to hold the entire congregation accountable, perhaps because of how faithful they had been during the time that Antipas was put to death. He says, I'm going to come. Again, that's second coming language, but it's within history, not at the end of history. And he says, I'm just going to hold them accountable, those who are propagating this teaching of Balaam. To him who conquers, to him I will give some of the hidden manna. There was a tradition in Judaism. Here's a text that is really close to the time of Revelation. And it talks about how in the future, how in the Messianic age, the treasury of manna will come down as it did for the children of Israel in the wilderness wandering. We also have language in the Psalms talking about manna as being the angel's food. We have other Jewish traditions linking the manna to the Garden of Eden. So this is a play on that tradition. But it says the hidden manna. Well, why does it say that the manna is hidden? We don't know exactly. It could be because, you know, according to Hebrews, manna, along with Aaron's rod and the Ten Commandments, was hidden away inside the Ark of the Covenant. It could be also a play on the teaching of the opponents. If these people who are saying, well, you can actually fornicate and participate in the eating of idols' foods under certain circumstances, or if you have some sort of inner understanding or whatever, they might be calling this a hidden or a secret teaching. And so this is a play on that. We're not sure. Maybe it's this art tradition, and maybe it's a shot at those who think that they've come up with a really clever way of not having to obey the rules. Last thing, I will give him a white stone and a new name written on the stone, which no one knows but him who receives it. This comes from Isaiah 62. You'll be called by a new name that the mouth of the Lord will bestow. An interesting thing about the context of Isaiah is the context is New Jerusalem, God marrying his bride, and the salvation of the nations. And that's kind of the culminating picture that Revelation is leading up to, is those very themes. So what's up with the white stone? Well, some ancients wore magical amulets that they thought would protect them from evil. And is Christ introducing, as it were, the Christian version of that? Well, it seems hard to believe, especially since he's not offering them the stone in the present age in which, you know, there is evil. He's offering them this stone in the age to come when evil's already going to be decisively dealt with. Is it an invitation stone? In the ancient world, if you were invited to something special, they would often give you a token. And this was like your way to get in when you showed up at the door. And some have suggested that's what this is, that this white stone is a way to get into the marriage supper of the Lamb. Because there's this contrast, right? He just talked about eating food sacrificed to idols. These people are going to dinners that they should not go to. And he's saying, don't go to those, and I'll give you an invitation stone, and you'll get into my dinner, into the marriage supper of the Lamb. That's possible. I like this view. It has some historical troubles, though, in that the tokens were not always white, and they were not always stones. So maybe not the best historical parallel. Yes, sir.
Any, the Israelites, when something significant happened, they would build a little thing of stone to remember that day, or remember that.
Oh, yeah.
Any tie-in with this?
I don't know. I haven't thought of it. Like you mean like a monumental stone?
Yeah. It was used to remember this day. Build a little thing of stone.
That makes sense. That does actually have a tie-in because New Jerusalem names are, like for example, names of the disciples, the names of the apostles, the names of the 12 tribes of Israel are written on the city, and that was often an honor given to people in ancient cities to have your name inscribed on a pillar or on a gate. So that could very well be part of the context. I didn't put it on here as one of my options, but that does make sense. A verdict stone. The verdict stone has an advantage in that it was always white. So in the ancient setting, when you went to vote, you would put a white stone in an urn, right? In fact, this was so common that people didn't just talk about casting the vote, they just said, casting my stone, right? The stone, the white stone is the vote. And especially in a judicial context, if you're in court and you're on trial, if you're presented with a black stone, that means you've been found guilty. If you're presented with a white stone, this means that you've been found innocent and you're free. So the white stone, the verdict stone is always white. And so, many scholars gravitate toward this as being the conceptual backdrop here, that there are all these people who are guilty. They're guilty of porneia. They're guilty of eating the idol's food. Keep yourself clean, and I'll give you the white verdict stone. Then you'll come to the marriage supper of the Lamb. That is my cue. I think he even got a brick.
Oh, I forgot who was last week.
I think last week was somebody from SpongeBob. The dude with the long nose. What's his name?
Squidward?
Squidward. How do you say it?
Squidward?
Squidward. Yeah, okay, sorry, I'm culturally really ignorant.
How do you know?
Questions, comments, complaints?
Not really.
We ran a little long, guys. Sorry, I just wanted to get 3 in there.
Do you think in the last days when the ability to buy or sell takes place that manna could become involved to keep the Christians from dying of starvation?
Yeah, I don't know. We're going to find that for Christians who would not participate in these dinners within trade guilds in the first century, they were already going without. So for an ancient audience, when they read the Mark of the Beast passage, they're not going to think, oh, that's in the future. They're going to actually think that that's happening in their time. Now, throughout history, this take on a number of forms in India, even recently in certain very conservative Hindu communities. They've put Christians in camps, and they're not allowing them to go to their jobs, and they're going without. But, obviously the specifics of what God might miraculously do in the future are, I don't know. But the manna language is tempting. Ma'am?
I was just curious again. Could you revisit the numbers being triangle, square, and cubed, and
Right? Yeah.
the significance of that again?
Yeah. So, I didn't unpack it yet, but it's going. No, you're okay. I'll just give you just a little thing. The shapes are going to have to do with places. Squares are good. Why are squares good? Well, they point to the city New Jerusalem, which is going to be shaped like a perfect cube. The triangles are bad. Why are the triangles bad? Well, the Tower of Babel was shaped like a ziggurat or a pyramid, triangular shape. This was a place for rebellion against God. And what is the city in this book called? Mystery Babylon, Babylon the Great. It all looks back to the rebellious Babel episode with Nimrod. The way that Jews thought of the Tower of Babel episode, we'll unpack it at a later time, but it's very interesting. It has a lot of relevance for the things that John is going to say. The rectangles will have to do with the courtyard at the temple, which was shaped as a perfect rectangle. And there are other tie-ins, but that's why triangular numbers are going to be evil, because John thinks the Tower of Babel rebellion never stopped, that it continues throughout history until the end of the age, and that Babylon the Great is the same old rebellion that started with Nimrod in the book of Genesis, and the squares anticipate the heavenly city. In terms of the triangle being cubed, this seems to be the only instance where this happens. And the church fathers noticed that the 1,000-year reign was a cube of 10, but they didn't seem to know what to do with it. And so my suggestion is that there is a connection between Revelation 20 and Revelation 2, because in Revelation 2, you get the number 10, and Satan is reigning, and the church is in jail. At the 1,000 years, Satan is in jail, and the church is reigning. It's a complete flop of what happens in chapter 2. What's interesting, this is 10, the triangular number, and this is 1,000, which is that triangular number being cubed. It's almost like that number gets redeemed by cubing it. And of course, by cubing it, now we're tying it into the New Jerusalem, which is positive, and squares are positive throughout the book. And so we'll look at words whose gematria, when we count them up, it equals a number that may be triangular or square or rectangular, and we'll see other numbers that occur in the text that are triangular, square, or rectangular, and they'll always work like this. The triangular ones will be evil, square ones will be good, and the rectangular ones will be a mixture. Okay. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Art.
Well, I want to throw something.
Oh! Yeah, I haven't been hit yet. It's all homework.
No, yeah.
Okay, so as I said, next week we won't meet because I'm going to have a surgery this week, and I'd like to just focus on recovery. And so hopefully you don't wander off. If you guys get tired of all my breaks and all my surgeries and you wander off, it won't offend me. If you leave, I'll leave, but if you're here, I'll be here. So
What day is your surgery?
it's tomorrow. Tomorrow afternoon.
Keep us posted.
Yeah, well, okay, I'll send out an email.
Oh, and let me pray for you.
Please.
Dear Lord and Heavenly Father, thank you for the heart and the work that has come into this class. Thank you for your superintending of Jason's eye and steadfastness he's put up with a terrible thing. I pray that the pain will come to an end tomorrow or soon after. More than that, I pray for healing. I pray that finally you will get the eye you want him to have, so that you know I'm precious.
Amen.